Hi everyone, I am Lexi. I am your host on this booktube channel called Lexi's Book Nook. This is a booktube channel all about books, book club recommendations and picks, reviews, and little discussion questions. So if you're looking for a book club and you want to throw in some book ideas and discussion questions, this is the channel for you. Or if you're stuck in a rut, don't know what to read, there's also that, or if you're starting a book club and you don't know what to suggest, this channel is for you. So I also have a podcast called Lexi's Book Nook on Spotify, Amazon Prime, and Audible, all for free. If you want to support the podcast or you love the podcast and you want more materials, you want to see my face, you want to see my little book nook or like a little corner, get inspiration for your own, and see book titles such as this. So this is the channel for you. Patreon is only $3 a month for all those amazing benefits, and you can support the podcast. Today's episode is a bonus episode. So if you listen to my podcast or you haven't listened to it, and you don't know what is a bonus episode, my podcast has 2 episodes per month. One in the beginning of the month to go over the review of all the books I'll be reading for the month. And just like a little general idea, the title, the author, what genre it is. And then the second episode of the month, I have read all those books, hopefully, give a little summary on each of them, my thoughts and review, and then only 3 discussion questions to give you like an idea of some discussion questions that you can ask for your book club or get some ideas of what to ask and start as an opening liner and then open it up for your book club to have a free conversation about. So this podcast is for you. And that second episode is going to have the bulk or the meat of everything that has been read and discussed. But if you don't know what a bonus episode is, that means this book was not on any of those podcast episodes. So you get some bonus material. So that's another bonus for my booktubers and my Patreon account members. So you can get all those bonus materials of the extra episodes. So this episode is on It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. So if you want the cover art, here it is. I know I don't have the book on me because I was borrowing it and it was going to the next member of my family because my sister's mom and I, even my grandma, love Colleen Hoover. So it looks like this. For my Patreon and booktubers, you can see the title art. My podcast followers will not be able to see that. So that is why you should subscribe to my Patreon account. So I'm going to go over a little summary, my thoughts, and 3 discussion questions, and we'll call it a day. Short, sweet, and to the point. So It Starts With Us is the sequel to It Ends With Us. This book is focused on the romance between lost lovers and childhood friends Lily Bloom and Atlas Corrigan. It is written from the alternating perspectives of both Lily and Atlas. It Starts With Us explores the complexities of divorce, domestic violence, and trauma. So warning, this book does contain content on domestic abuse. If you are sensitive to this material, I don't really suggest this book because it can get a little heavy. If you have read It Ends With Us and you are part of that relationship dynamic, It Starts With Us is not as bad as It Ends With Us, but there is still talk about it. So just a little warning. I'm not going to go much into it in this episode, but if you want to read the book, there's just that little disclaimer there. So my thoughts. I love Atlas. I love his character so much, especially after It Ends With Us. I also loved him in the sequel. I felt like with the sequel, though, my emotions that connected me with Lily and Atlas and Ryle have been diminished. Like the magic is not quite as there, and I feel like that with most sequels. I still love Atlas. He is still near and dear to my heart. He's very sensitive. He is a bigger and better man, very strong, and Lily is just as strong, if not stronger, than in the prequel. Ryle, still don't like him. I know there's a lot of moments where he's very romantic and nice in the first one, but the second one, it really solidifies your opinion on him. Like, Lily made the best decision about divorcing him. So the feelings are still there compared to the prequel or the original, I guess, but they're not as intense. I felt like the emotions that Colleen wrote for It Ends With Us are not as strong. They're like I said, there's not a lot of talk of domestic abuse, and not that I want to hear about it. It's very hard, especially with me being like part of that kind of relationship dynamic in years past. It's really, really hard to read it, let alone be a part of it. So I'm glad it wasn't super involved, but I felt like there was no real climax in the story. There wasn't really a lot of depth to the story or a very strong plot line. It's about Atlas and Lily coming together and starting dating and being in a loving relationship again. We're all rooting for that. Yes. But we kind of go in the story knowing that and knowing that they're going to end up being together. There's just a little bit of fluff in there that didn't need to be in there, but I'm glad it was in there to add some more story to it. But I felt the story was lacking. There wasn't much complexities, a lot of depth. There wasn't enough conflict. And we know that Lily and Alice went through a lot of conflict and a lot of difficulties, especially with Ryle. And Ryle is still in the picture, especially with Emerson, the baby being born, and trying to have joint custody. It just didn't feel as intense as the original. I felt like the story was kind of lackluster in a way. It's still a good love story. You still root for Lily and Atlas. You really want them to work. You love them. But I felt like you knew what was going to happen. You knew the ending. And I like a story that has like a plot twist, or it has some windy roads, that has some complexity. It has some more depth. And I know they have a very long relationship. I did not love it. And I felt like there was not enough material to make this as good as the original. So those are just my thoughts. Overall, I really like the story. I love the addition to the story of like Alice's family being more introduced into their lives. I still think it's a good love story. I just don't highly recommend it. I don't say that it is as good as the first. Absolutely not. But I think that goes with almost most series. The original is always the best. But that's just my opinion. So those are my thoughts on It Starts With Us. We'll go into the 3 discussion questions. Lily has come a long way from the person she was when we first met her at the rooftop in It Ends With Us. What do you think about Lily's character development? And I think she matured a lot. She evolved and matured. She has learned to not only stand up for herself, but also for her daughter, whose name is Emerson. She created a life where her daughter would be safe, and that takes a lot of bravery and maturity to end not just any relationship, but an abusive relationship, and try to end with good terms and have that abusive person still be in that daughter or child's life. That takes an immense amount of bravery, a lot of maturity and communication. And Lily is probably the strongest female characters I can say hands down in any book I've read. And I think it's because of the domestic abuse and how she was raised, and also being part of a family that prioritizes family. And I think she has matured a lot. In the second question, during It Ends With Us, we saw Ryle get violent most of the time when he's drunk. His sister Alyssa also cheated while being drunk. Do you think it's fair to blame situations like this on alcohol? And I say no, absolutely not. Alcohol is never an excuse for any set sort of behavior. I'm sure we've all heard the alcohol talk, always in moderation, don't get drunk, don't do anything stupid, don't text and drive, or whatever. Alcohol lowers your inhibitions, and that's exactly what that is in these 2 situations with Ryle and Alyssa. It causes the person to become more lax and more prone to act on what they're thinking, as opposed to if they're sober. So I don't think it's fair to blame the alcohol, because there's an underlying issue beneath of that. If that thought, even if it's subconscious and they're not acting on it while they're sober, that thought is still there, and they have that intention whether they're doing it or not. So when they're drinking, it just intensifies it and allows them to act on it. So like, I don't think it's fair to blame this on alcohol, but rather the person who has the thoughts and these notions that they know what's wrong and they're not going to do it, but the thing that they want to do is still there. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't think alcohol is ever an excuse. It's just there to lower your inhibitions and allows the person to act on the actions that they know that are wrong, basically. But third question. Fans were so excited when they first heard a sequel was coming out. Did It Starts With Us live up to your expectations, and would you recommend it? So I talked about this and my thoughts about it. The sequel did not live up to my expectations. I thought it was cute. And as usual, like I said, it had me rooting for Lily and Atlas. But I also knew, like I said, that their love story, I knew it was going to begin and end with them together. So it didn't really hook my emotions as deeply as the first because there was no conflict. There was no doubts. There was no, I don't think I said conflict. I felt like it was just a straight story, just finally writing out their happily ever after. And that's fine. But I don't think it was as good as the first because you get connected to Ryle at one point and then you start to hate him. You're not sure about Atlas because you don't know his story, and then you love him. You don't know if you feel bad for Lily because you put her in a position of being abused. But you see how them evolve throughout the book. To have that sequel, you see how Atlas is a bigger person and how strong Lily is. But that's what it's expected, you would think. So I felt like nothing new was introduced into the second story except for Atlas's family being reintroduced in it. But at the same time, do we really care about that? So I'm going to leave that to my audience. I'm going to leave this episode with that question. Do we care about a long-lost family that have found Atlas in the midst of Lily and Atlas's relationship? Do we care? I'm going to leave that to you. But I do recommend this book. I do think it's a cute love story. But I'm going to leave that to my audience because I know a lot of Colleen Hoovers out there really love Lily and Atlas. I am one of them, and they love Colleen Hoover in general. So this is just a bonus episode on one of the books I read over July. We are entering August, so I hope to be reading a lot more. Stay tuned to listen to more of my podcast episodes. They will be coming out very, very shortly. And that is Lexi's Book Nook, spelled Lexie, on Spotify, Amazon Prime, and Audible for free. If you want to support the podcast, I have my Patreon account for $3 a month to see my face, see my little corner of a book nook, get some inspiration for your own, see the book titles like this. Yes, it might be on my phone because most of my books are library. I do have this little library of my own, but I don't have everything. There's too many books out there. But that's all out there, and BookTube and Patreon will have my bonus episodes. If you want to check out my website, you can also buy copies of these books. It Starts With Us and the book that I just held up, which is the Alice Network. They're all on lexisbooknook.com, spelled Lexies booknook.com. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you keep on reading.